How's everyone doing? You hanging in there? It's good to try to have a little life as we're at the tail end of this convention. So thank you for being here. I know that being a SOLIDWORKS World veteran myself, you definitely lose steam as the event goes on. So I appreciate you being here. I just wanted you guys to know that. So welcome to this session. We're focusing on creating elegant 3D products, mainly using Sketch Ink. So we're going to be using some pen tools, drawing on screen, and making some great designs with it. So hope you're excited. My name is James Jepson, and I'm going to go ahead and dive into our presentation. Everyone good to go? Yes? Okay. Just need to make sure we're connecting here. All right.
How do you spell your last name?
Jepson is Jepsen. You'll see it on the slide too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. All right. So as I mentioned, the session today is focused on SOLIDWORKS Sketch Ink. So creating elegant 3D products from concept sketches. So I'm going to just do a quick little overview of what the session is going to hold. So we'll start with an introduction just about me and my background. From there, I'm going to kind of queue up the design scenario for what's happening with the model we're going to be working on. So you're not just seeing me do random things in SOLIDWORKS, there's a point to it. So once I tell you about the design scenario, we're going to dive into SOLIDWORKS from there. And we're going to start by focusing on sketching smooth splines using the pen tool on screen from some napkin-style hand sketches, which, you know, if you're ever doing a concept phase in a design, you're going to start with some hand drawings and just get a rough idea of what you're even going for. So we're going to use those, and we're going to draw on top of them and start making our 3D model. Once we start using those hand sketches and creating splines, we're going to create surfaces and a solid body from those splines and start making our 3D model. And then I wanted to show you some unique functionality with Sketch Ink being a newer feature in SOLIDWORKS. There's a design review and 3D markup capability that's really helpful when collaborating on concept designs with other teammates or potential customers or anyone that's working alongside you creating those designs. And then finally, we'll use that markup and that collaboration phase to actually make some changes to the model, and we'll integrate them and then just do some finishing touches that also uses the pen feature to show you some unique final touches you can put on your model. Sound good? Cool. So that's the overview of this session. So a little introduction about myself. My name is James Jepson. I work at Solid Professor. We're in San Diego, California. And I'm the Senior Content Services Manager. So what I do is I work with companies like, I actually work with SOLIDWORKS as one of our customers I work primarily with. But I create custom training content for other people. So if someone needed us to make a presentation on doing pen sketching, they would hire Solid Professor and I'd be the contact to make that custom training. So that's just a little bit about what I do. I've been at Solid Professor since March 2014. I've been using SOLIDWORKS for about 10, 11 years, since 2008, and I've been CSWE since last year. My background is a little bit of a mixture. I studied structural engineering in school. I've worked in aerospace. I've done a little bit of medical device design. And one of my favorite jobs, I taught engineering to kids using Legos. So that was awesome. And then just a little bit more of specific projects I've done in my role. Mainly worked on the My SOLIDWORKS library. So if you've watched any training content on that part of their website, that's something that me and my team worked on directly. So I have a lot of experience in creating SOLIDWORKS training. So hopefully this session reflects that. All right. So let's talk about the design scenario. So you may be wondering, what are we going to actually create, right? So we're designing a product. That product is a prosthetic arm to allow somebody to play guitar. And we were inspired. We saw this. There's an actual design online, which I'll show you some images of. It's a real product, and we kind of made our own version of it. So I think it's a really great blend of something real, but something edgy and cool, and you'll see it come together. So that has some constraints. As you know, prosthetic fits to someone's body. So we need it to fit the user's arm geometry. We want to make a more futuristic version, make it edgy and curvy, and give some accented edges. So it's not just a standard prosthetic, we're going to kind of modernize it. And then we're going to make sure that it has a hand on the end of it. That's a very specific part of the design to make sure it grips onto a guitar pick really well. And then another constraint is, since we're in the concept design phase, you want to make it 3D printable. So that way you can do rapid iterations, make sure it's you're getting closer and closer to your final design. So those are some constraints around this type of product. So here's an image of the one that you can find online yourself. I even have the link at the bottom. And it was fit to this person. And there's video as well of him actually playing the guitar. Theirs is slightly different. If you can see at the very end on the right, there's actually, they used a clamp or like a claw. And we changed that aspect of the design in the one that you'll see. So that's what we're creating. You guys ready to dive into SOLIDWORKS? Cool. All right. I'm just going to switch the display real quick. So to help with doing this, sketching on screen pen design, I'm using a Wacom tablet, and it's a great product to use to draw right in front of you. And I'll be doing almost all of my modeling on this tablet, almost exclusively with this pen. So that's a really great feature to have. It's made by the company Wacom, W-A-C-O-M. Yeah, and they have displays you can check out. All right, here's our starting point for today. This is our napkin style hand sketches. So a key thing about this is that I aligned all my 2D views in different planes, and they're all to scale. That's a key part of me getting my model to work correctly. So if you're ever importing sketch pictures, especially from multiple angles, make sure that they're to the right scale. So this may be a little bit confusing, but I just want to show you, this is the front view I'll be working from, and where I'll be primarily making my sketches. And then I have all the other views as well. So here's a top view. Here's a left view. I know it looks a little confusing, especially if you've never seen this before. I just want to make sure you guys get to see kind of the starting point pretty clearly. And then I'll also be using the bottom view shown right there. All right. So there we go. We're going to start with our first sketch on this front view, like I just shown you. And if you ever want to use Sketch Ink, it's available in the command manager. So you can always right click, and it's just included in your standard set of tools. So I already have it turned on. And this part of the command manager is where I'm going to use all my pen features. So to start, I'm making a 3D spline, not just a 2D. So I'm going to be, whenever I'm editing my views, I'm going to be looking straight at the front view, the top view, things like that. So to start, I'm going to create a 3D sketch. And when I do that, you can see a bunch of tools enable at the top, and I'm going to enable pen. And that allows me to draw directly on screen. And because I want to turn on auto sketch entities, that's going to allow me to convert the path that I draw on screen directly to sketch objects right when it's drawn. So we're ready to start drawing. The first path that I'm going to create is this one right here. If you can follow my cursor, it's kind of in the middle. So all I'm going to do, and this is the brilliance of drawing and creating splines and curvy geometry, I'm just going to trace that. It doesn't have to be exact. It's okay if it's a little wavy. And it did convert it to sketch geometry. However, the left side is an arc and the right side is a line. But in this context toolbar, you can automatically convert it. So I'm just going to tap this little icon here. And now I created a spline. And this is almost an identical of that path I just drew. And it even smooths it out so it's not a wavy line. So yeah, what's up?
Can you also turn it into a style spline?
I think this just converts it to a standard spline, and then you could do more editing from there. Yeah, but I'm going to do some editing of the spline. So great. We have our first spline, and I just want to do a couple little touch-ups. So I was in the pen tool here in the top left. Now I'm going to switch to the select command, so you just need to toggle those. And now I'm using it like a regular mouse. So I just want to make sure that this endpoint on the right matches up. And then something that I like to use when editing splines is turn on control polygon. Didn't look like I actually selected it. So right click, display control polygon. That's just an easy way for me to edit the curvature much more easily. If you haven't done this before, I highly suggest making your spline curvature edits that way. Gives you really good graphical control. So great. So I've drawn it in this view, but remember we're making a 3D spline, not just a 2D. So I need to start editing its geometry in other planes. So I'm just going to switch, and we're going to look at the top view now. Can you guys see this okay? Centered on screen? All right. So even though I had created the geometry on that front face, it just looks like a line now from the top. So we also need to move its geometry around from this view. So the curvature that this is going to follow is this line here. It's second from the right. You guys can see that all right? So what I'm going to do, I still have the select enabled, and I'm going to drag those points. And what I usually do when I'm determining where exactly I want my spline is I put the endpoint first, then I move the spline kind of in its general area, and then just use the control polygon to dial it in. So I'm going to move the other endpoint. And do you see those yellow dashed lines on screen? Those actually help when you're editing a spline in 3D. If you keep it horizontal to its starting point, it's not going to affect the curvature of the spline in the other views. So you want to just drag it over horizontally. Otherwise, if I dragged it like down here, it's editing the other angle of the spline as well, which is a little bit of the difficulty of creating 3D splines. You want to make sure it stays in the right position as you're editing. So I'm going to make sure it's horizontal. And I'm actually going to leave this point right at the corner because it follows this arc right there. So I have my two endpoints. From here, I'm just going to drag the spline points over so they lie basically on top of where I want the curve to go. And then I'm going to use these control polygon points that are just next to it to do a little bit of modification. And it doesn't have to be exact, especially for a concept design, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to get it lined up. All right, so we edited the spline on the front and the top. I'll just show you real quick that it's now going through 3D space. Can you see that? Especially if I rotate, you can see it's kind of going out on its own. And it still lines up from the front view, even though I was editing looking from the top. So that's the key to how we would make this model. So I've finished my first spline. I'm going to exit the 3D spline by tapping here in the right corner. And there we go. We have our first spline. Now this design is going to be a combination of a bunch of splines. I'm going to draw one more. And then what we're going to do is create a boundary surface from it. So this model will eventually be created almost entirely from boundary surfaces going around the outside. So we have our first spline. Let's just make one more. And I'm going to speed this up a little bit since you've seen how to make one already. So 3D sketch just like before. And this line I'm going to actually draw here a little farther down. So making sure pen is enabled in top left, I'll just draw right on top of it on screen like I had done before. So I'm just going to trace it, get as close as I can. Like before, I'll convert it directly to a spline. And it's a really good representation of what I just drew. Even though I didn't draw it exactly on top, the spline converted it to exactly how I drew it. So I'll switch to the select tool. And let's move this right point over just a little bit so that lines up. Looks like this bottom left corner lines up pretty well. So now I'll just move the spline points around. And this looks pretty dang close to me. I know it's not exact, but we don't need it to be hyper precise. We're just making concept features for now. So this one, I'm actually going to use the bottom view as my other reference instead of the top view. And it may look a little confusing since you haven't seen this view yet. But the arc that I'm going to follow is this right edge, and it comes in and cuts up just a little bit up in this upper right corner. So just like before, I'm going to move the endpoints of the spline first, trying to keep them as horizontal as I can. And I don't want to get overlapping with this other point. Sometimes when you drag splines to where other points are showing on screen, it'll actually create a constraint. So just to make sure you're watching for that if you do create splines like this of your own. So we're going to put it right here. And just like before, I'm going to drag the spline points over horizontally till they line up with that curve. And then I'll right click, enable display control polygon, and just use those to align it. So this one looks good. And I'll do one more little adjustment. All right, there we go. So just like before, I'll rotate so you can see it's going through 3D space, and it still aligns with that front view from before. That's the key to making this model, is making sure the alignments stay correct. All right, so we saw how easy it is to draw those splines on screen and just make some quick edits. So now we're ready to make our first boundary surface feature. So from here, I just need to cap off the ends of it in order to use that surfacing tool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make another 3D sketch. And this time, I'm gonna look from the left view. So I'll switch to that view. And this edge, I wanna be an arc that comes down along this right side. So instead of using the spline tool, I'll just come over to the sketch tab, select 3-point arc in this case, and I'll just tap the two endpoints and set my position. So that's capped off one end. And now I'll cap off the other end, which in this design is just a line. So this is really simple. I'll enable the line tool, select the first endpoint and the second, and exit out. So great. We've now capped off both ends, and we have our two splines, and that's going to allow us to make our boundary surface. So I'm going to hide all these sketches so it's a little bit easier to see. I'll just suppress this folder that has them all contained in it. And now you can see, here's our outline. So if you're not familiar with a boundary surface, it just takes two end sketches and then sweeps between them, and I'll be using the splines as guide curves. So hopefully that will make sense as we go. So from the Surfaces tab, I'll enable Boundary Surface. And I'm actually gonna, in this Direction 1 box, I'm gonna select the arc first, which is an open segment. So I'll just click the green check to only select that segment, which is seen as an open group in this case. And then I'll select the line as the other end of the boundary surface. So it's interpolating between them. And now we want to incorporate the splines as guide curves. So I'll come down to the Direction 2 box, and all I have to do is select those two splines right on screen. When I do, you can see the surface fits between them. Click the green check, and now we have our first boundary surface. All right, so at this point, in the model that we created, the entire outer contour is just made up of boundary surfaces like this. So rather than repeating myself over and over, drawing splines and making boundary surfaces, I'm gonna switch forward to having all those included in the model. All right, so here is that outer contour of this prosthetic arm that we're making. you can see it's actually using 5 boundary surfaces. And this one right here is the one that we just made together. So you can see all of them surrounding the outer geometry. So once you have those outer contours, you want to make a solid. And the way that we're going to do that is fill in the ends like caps and then convert it into a solid. So if you haven't done this before, we're going to use the filled surface command, which just takes edges and an enclosed geometry and then just caps it off by putting a surface in that area. So I'm going to cap off this end first, and all I have to do is select the 5 edges. 3, oops, that was the wrong one. 4, 5. Didn't like my selections for some reason. Let's do that over real quick. Just having a hard time selecting that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make it easier. All right. 1. Let's get it right this time. 3, 4, 5. All right, so it just interpolated between all those edges and it's making a filled surface. You can see the highlight color, so I'll just click the green check. And now I've capped off that end. So now I want to do the same thing on the other end. This one's a little bit simpler. It's mainly just a rectangular shape. So I'll just enable filled surface again. Select our 4 edges on this end. 3, 4. There we go. And click the green check again. All right. So now we have our entire body. That's an enclosed volume, and we can convert it into a solid using all these surfaces and using the knit surface command. So from the surfaces tab, I'll use knit surface right here. And a great way to just select them is to drag on screen. So I'm going to drag from the top left corner down to the right. When I do that, it just selects all of them automatically. And there's this create solid checkbox. That's going to convert them into a solid feature. So I'll enable that and click the green check. Now we have a solid body. And there's a couple ways you can verify that. There's a solid bodies folder listed here, whereas before it was surface. So I'll expand that. That was the wrong tab. Here's our solid body in the folder. And then you can always check as well by sectioning. This shows you that it's not hollow. It has solid geometry inside of it. All right, so now we have a solid body, which is a great point to be at when you're creating your concept model. And I want to switch ahead once more to show you having the gripper hand at the end, and then we'll also have the inside of the arm hollowed out. So save a little time. I'll go ahead and move forward. And you can see it's the same geometry, but now it has this hollowed out end. And then on the other end, this is our kind of take on how to make a little gripper where the pick would slide in the center right here. So it's kind of like a different version of a claw. So that's where the pick would connect. All right. So now that we have our whole model, it's a solid body. It has all the features we're looking for. Next, I want to show you guys some 3D markup and getting to a point where once you have your concept model, you want to collaborate with other people on how to make edits, how to, change up the form, things like that. So the 3D markup tool is actually in the Evaluate tab. And let me see. It's not exactly where I would expect it to be. If you're ever unsure where it's at, you can always type in the upper right corner. So I'm just going to type in markup. Not sure why it's not finding it.
You may want to unfold and make sure that you are searching commands.
Oh yeah, I was in the search function, wasn't I? There we go, thank you. Markup view, thank you. So I'll just click the icon to show where that's at. All right, so I'll enable markup. And this brings up a little menu. And the first thing that sorry, let me erase that real quick. For some reason it doesn't want to rotate. Let me exit out of that. All right, so before I do the markup, there's an area that maybe your design team or the people you're collaborating with wouldn't like to have this hard corner right here. You know, maybe that would be kind of like a safety issue, that having a sharp corner like this is something that could hurt the person using it or somebody else or damage something. So maybe this area is of concern. We can use that markup. Let's go to recent commands. We'll go to markup. So in this markup menu, there's a pen feature on the left, and I can change the color. I like using red because it's easy to see. You can even adjust the size of the tip. So I'll do it somewhere in the middle. And if this corner is our area of focus, I'll just draw a circle directly on screen. So it's easy to point out what you want somebody to look at and focus on. And then maybe these edges in particular, instead of being straight, you know, maybe want to make them curves instead. So I can just draw an arrow directly to those edges to point them out specifically. And then maybe I want to add a note, which you can see is in this menu as well. Maybe I want to add a note. That way I can explain exactly what I want to have happen or communicate to somebody. And I'll just say too sharp. And then make edges curves instead of lines. All right. So I've selected that. Maybe, you know, there's this whole formatting menu as well. So I'll just increase the font to make it a little bit larger, make it bold, and I can even change the color to match the sketches that I drew on screen. So great. So now I've added that note to my model as well. And I'll just click the green check. And from here, I'm still in the markup workflow. So you can see there's a exit markup view in the top right corner. So I'll now push exit. And now this markup is included in our model. And the great part about it, if you haven't seen this before, is that it stays in the 3D design. But as you're rotating, when you rotate out of that view, it shows it a little transparent. So when you let go, it disappears. But it's not like it got deleted. It's still there, it's just hidden. So when you rotate back to that view, it reappears. So it makes it really easy to still work in your model without it getting in the way, but it's still included. So if you ever want to turn markups off, there's a markups folder here in the tree. So I'll expand that. And since I want to go ahead and make these changes, I'll just hide that markup view. So I'll right click on it and select hide. So you can always turn that on and off, and you can do that for all your markups. Okay, great. So like we had mentioned, we want to make some edits to this design. So I'll go in and I'll change these lines to arcs instead of having linear edges. So if you ever are since we're working in a parametric system, we want to roll back to where those features are, and then we're going to edit from that point on. So I'll just move the rollback bar up to only include my boundary surfaces. You can see right now, I actually only have 3 of them showing on screen. So I'll make sure that the other ones are showing as well. So show and show. So we're back to where we had our 5 boundary surfaces from before. And we want to make sure that we're editing these lines. So I'll need to find those 3D sketches. So if I just hover over any of those boundary surface features, I can see which ones I'm going to be editing. So this one has the linear edge, so I'll expand that. And here's my 3D sketch that has that line. So from here, I'll right click and edit. And at this point, I'll go ahead and look directly at that view, so I'll make it normal. Sorry, that's actually not the normal view I wanted. We want to look from the left side. So here's our linear edge. I'll just go ahead and delete that. Delete. And to get the right position of our arc that we're adjusting to, I need to show the other boundary surface, or sorry, the other 3D sketch that was included. So we had a line going from here down to this corner, and now we'll just draw an arc. So I'll come up to the Sketch tab and select 3-point arc. Select both corners. And, we're still working as kind of a concept model, so I'm not too worried about the size. I kind of like this shape of the arc, so I'll just place it. Of course, you can always add dimensions later on. But for now, that looks good to me. So I'll exit that 3D sketch. And you can see that it came up with an error. And the reason for that is that the boundary surface is still looking for that linear edge that's not there anymore. So I'll just hit stop and repair. And you can see the boundary surface shown with the red X. I'll go ahead and edit that. And this makes it a little more clear what it's looking for. It shows that red dashed line. So that's the missing sketch entity, which also shows an error here in the direction 1 box. So I'll just right click and delete that. And I'll just select the arc instead with the green check since it's an open entity. I don't know why I didn't like that. In past cases, I've had some issues come up where because of the curvature, the boundary feature doesn't like it, boundary surface feature. So I'll edit the 3D sketch again. And let's just drag it in a little bit. I'll make it a little less. Let's just go ahead and redraw that arc real quick to clean it up. So I'll connect the corners. And I think the problem was it being too curvy, so I'll bring it in a little bit. Like I said, you can always dimension these later. And we'll repair our boundary surface. There's that line again. So I'll delete it and select the arc now. All right, that time it worked. So we're in business again. So I'll click the green check, and now we have a more fluid corner. But just like before, there's other edges that need to be edited. So this edge also has a line, and we want to convert that to an arc. So I'll edit that 3D sketch as well. All right, I'm going to look at it from the left view again. And let's delete that line. And just like before, I'll do a 3-point arc. Connect the corners. And let's not make it too curvy just to avoid that error from before. So I'll set it about there. So now this corner is not nearly as sharp. It's much smoother. It's going to make the design a lot more rounded and not have as much of a safety problem for somebody to use it. Yeah, you certainly could make it tangent if that's something you wanted to do specifically. You do lose a little bit of the hard edge look on the model the more you make things tangent, but it's kind of a style preference at this point. All right, so I've finished that sketch, and we'll exit out. Just like before, we have rebuild issues with that boundary surface just because it's looking for that linear edge. So let's just quickly do that together. Here's our boundary surface feature, edit. And I'll get rid of that line from the direction 1 box. And from here, I need to make sure my 3D sketch is showing. And now I can select the arc for direction 1. So there we go. So we made that edit. If you were working with a team and you had that markup collaboration, you can now see the model's been changed and your team can move closer and closer to having a finished product. So as you would normally do, you've made those edits in a parametric environment, you would roll back. This may have some rebuild issues. Instead of working through those right now, I'm just going to skip ahead and I'm going to show you that same model, but with solid geometry incorporated. All right, so here you can see, let me hide that sketch real quick, just so you can see it a little more clearly. All right. So here is the same geometry. You can see this has the rounded corner and it incorporated all the changes in the design. It still has this open end. It has our gripper on the end right here. So now this is the point where, you know, we've made our body, we've made our model, and maybe we want to add some finishing touches to it. So the next thing I want to do, you saw I had a sketch image included. I just use my company logo to make it easy to draw something. What I'm going to do is show you how using the pen and drawing on screen makes it really easy to trace logos if you want to emboss a logo on the side of something and make it pop out. So I'm going to trace this the cap part of the logo so it pops out from the side of the prosthetic. So I'll go ahead and just edit that sketch. This sketch includes that image already. And let's zoom in a little bit. And I'm just going to draw the outer contour of the hat. So I'll just use the line tool real quick. And you can see all I have to do is just tap on screen. And you can see how quickly I'm making that outer profile. So I'll do that once more, drawing the lower portion. This time I need an arc on the bottom. Sorry, we need 3-point arc. So we'll connect these 2 points, set our arc, switch back to the line, and we're just finishing closing that off. So you can see it's pretty easy to draw right in that sketch and use the picture as the basis for creating a custom logo or popping something out of your model. So we have that logo traced. We can exit that sketch and I'll rotate it. So what's going to happen is that profile I just drew is we're going to use the wrap feature and wrap it right onto the side of the arm, and then it'll pop out from using that wrap feature. So just like before, I'll type in wrap in the search bar, making sure I'm using the command instead of searching online. If I can spell wrap correctly. Wrong kind of wrap. All right, and we'll enable the tool right there. And you can either just click on the sketch itself in the graphics view, or you can select it from the feature manager design tree. So I'll select it from there. This feature, we want to wrap it onto a spline surface. That's what we've been working with. So I'll select that option shown here. And down below, I need to select the face I'm going to wrap that sketch onto. So I'll select that side face of my model. You can already see it is outlined in yellow, giving me a preview of how it's going to wrap. And this box right here is where I can set a thickness value. And it's going to pull that thickness directly off the face I selected. So I'm just going to make that a little bit thicker. Instead of 0.1, I'll do 0.15. That just seemed to look good when I've done this in the past. And it's kind of a stylistic feature to, how far you want a logo to pop off of a surface. Usually you don't want it too far, so it's not going to stick out and be like an entirely new feature, coming off your model. And this isn't an incredibly intense command or sketch, so I'm just going to leave my accuracy to low since I just used lines. And now all I have to do is click the green check, and then I'll hide that sketch to make it a little more clear. And now you can see that logo is now a 3D feature popping off the side of the arm.
You draft it now if you wanted to?
Yeah, you could totally draft it. I mean, yeah, that's a great feature if you need to be doing injection molding, creating plastics. Especially with really small, thin features like that, you want to make sure it can be manufactured properly. Great. So that's a nice finishing touch. It could be any logo. I just used the one that was convenient for me. And now we have our final design. So just to kind of sum up what we did together, the power of creating this model was in drawing on screen. I'm using Sketch Ink, tracing curves, using those hand drawings that I had initially. And then I can just make quick modifications, make my boundary surfaces, and you can make some really awesome curvy models. And the great part about this one is it's a real life product. There's someone out there actually using this to play guitar. So I loved how that actually tied in with a real life story. So that is the end of this model. And now I'd love to answer any questions you guys have or dig into any details. So yeah.
Your initial sketches in there, did you just put insert sketch picture into the SOLIDWORKS file? In other words, get your profiles to sketch over. How did you get those into the system?
Yeah, so the question was, how did I get those sketch pictures in there? So I'll just switch to that kind of starting point that I had. And I'll show you, let me hide that boundary surface. All right, so here's where we were with all the starting hand sketches. I have a folder here, and I included all of them in different views. So, this right view, let's do the front view. So you can see, if I go normal to this view, this is the front view, and this is just a JPEG image. And if you ever need to insert a sketch picture, you just go to Tools, and then Sketch Tools, and then come down. It's usually here toward the bottom. There's Sketch Picture. And I don't think I have any of those images on this machine at the moment, but you would just select that image, and when it's brought in, it usually scales it up a lot, and you can just drag it down to the size you need. You can even position it using dimensions and things. That way you get it exactly where you need it. So, yeah.
Can you do a 3D sketch with the markup style ink and not have it convert to the spline?
Yes, you definitely can.
Cartoony 3D sketch?
Yeah, totally. So since I'm already in a sketch view right now, I'll just kind of quickly show you. So when I started doing my workflow, I had this auto sketch entities turned on. So you can turn that off, and now I'm just drawing. So it's still capturing that path that I drew on screen, but it didn't convert it to sketch geometry. There's actually this little context toolbar that appears, and if I select this one, which is the same icon as auto sketch entities, that's where you can change it back and forth.
Can you manipulate it at all, like you could in Photoshop, say?
I mean, that's going to be more, sorry, the question was, can you manipulate this curvature, since it's not a spline in my sketch? Not that I'm aware of, because it's just a pen path on screen. But if you did convert it to a spline, then it's fully editable at that point.
So now if you rotate it, is it going to go transparent again or stay opaque?
So he asked, is it going to go transparent or stay opaque on screen? Let me exit that sketch and rotate, and you can see it stays there. So the markup functionality is where it includes that hiding and showing built right into the tool. So yes, you can do some custom artwork on screen if you wanted to and still have it stay in your model.
It looks like it's simulating a Sharpie, right?
Yeah, so you can, let me just keep editing the sketch. See, this is front view. So with the pen tool, you can still select colors. You can change the tip size all from here. It doesn't have to be converted into a spline. So I just drew a black curve. You know, maybe I want to go alongside it with a red curve. It's all very customizable. That one converted because I had that turned on still. Let me undo that. Undo. So yeah, let's come back to red. Make it a little bit thicker. Auto sketch entities is turned off. So there you go. Yes?
And how do you get it so that when you are sketching on screen, you get the spline out? Because I'm only getting line art.
Yeah, great question. So how do you get it to be a spline instead of lines and arcs? So I'll show you what I did when I created my first splines. Still using the pen tool. I'll do auto sketch entities to make sure that it's going to change to sketch geometry. So drawing on screen, it's going to, SOLIDWORKS is building in some intelligence into the shape you're trying to approximate. So with a spline, you're trying to create really curvy, sometimes really curvy, spline geometry. So if you want to do something like this, that seemed to work for me. There's this button here in the context toolbar, and I thought it would say the name of it when I hovered over it. But this toggles between setting it as a spline and then setting it as arcs, lines, and other types of geometry. You can even create ellipses and circles while sketching on screen. It all depends on what you're inputting, and it tries to approximate what you just drew. So if I push this button, it thought of it as an arc. Because my curve was so close together, it didn't know how to change that into an arc. So you want to try to get as close as you can to what you're trying to draw, but you can always toggle between them. So you may have seen when I drew my spline, both times I drew my spline, it actually converted it to an arc and a line, if you remember that earlier on. So mine looked kind of like this when I first drew my splines, but I can just toggle between them and set it as a spline instead. Does that answer your question? You're still not getting it to work properly? Okay. Sometimes it's kind of context specific. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure 19 would help a lot. There's been a lot of pen enhancements. I think that tool, if I remember right, was a 2019 update in specific, yeah. So hopefully that helps. You're free to come up here and try it out on mine. Great. Does anyone else have any other questions about the model, about sketching, drawing on screen? I think you were first. Go ahead. Can you use the pen to redline a drawing? As far as I know, yeah. I haven't done that specifically, but I'd be happy to try it afterward if you'd like. What was your question?
When you have the auto sketch entities turned off, you just get the markup tablets. Can you retroactively convert those, or do you need to have the auto sketch on?
As far as I know, you can still convert them. So I just turned pen off and turned my select tool on. And when I tap on that, this little menu still comes up. And then I have that ability to switch it.
Thank you.
Yeah. That way you're never losing, your ability to convert whenever you draw something on screen. So, great. Are there any other questions out there?
That's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, question?
Can you switch back and forth between your sketch screen and the keyboard during this process, or is it the best approach is to stay with your sketch pad?
I have a full keyboard on screen, so you can do it digitally. If it's connected to a computer, you can still use all the keys on your keyboard on the computer as well. This doesn't restrict you at all. It's almost just it's another way to engage with SOLIDWORKS directly on top of what you're seeing. So nothing gets eliminated. Yeah. Did I see another hand come up? Yes.
Couple tools that you use, I don't know how you got there.
Sure.
Display, control, polygon.
Uh-huh.
You got there.
Yeah, so you can do this with any spline. It gives you those control polygon control points. All you do is hover over a spline, right click, and that brings up a list of options. And you can see that option shown here. So you just enable it, and that brings up, these are the control polygons on the corners. So all you do is just click and drag, and you're editing the curvature of the spline. Yeah. You can always still just drag the spline point directly, but using control polygons gives you another handle to control the curvature. And I've found in my own experience that it's a much more intuitive way of controlling the curvature rather than editing the spline points and the tangential arcs or the lines that come off of it to control angle and magnitude and things.
And you can dimension those, right?
The control polygons? I believe so. I haven't done that in this model. Let's just try it real quick. Doesn't seem to want to.
Or like try from the origin, just like some point.
Yeah, to a specific point. Well, I am in 3D right now. Maybe that's part of my problem. That's a good question, though. I actually haven't done that myself. Yeah, I'm not sure it likes that at the moment, but
I think if you can do that for style splines.
style splines, not standard splines.
Yeah, so the style splines does actually your construction geometry.
Okay, so I guess the answer would be convert it to a style spline if you can, and then use your dimension tools. Yeah.
Here you've got also the little arrows that you can pull to sort of adjust the power at the ends, like
Right.
and those have a dimension as well from 0 to 1 that you have to key in, so it's kind of impractical.
Yeah, so you're talking about these lines that come off of it.
An angle and a weight as well.
Right. It has the angle right here. It has the magnitude with the little arrow. That's kind of the traditional way that a lot of people have gotten used to editing spline curvature. And I found that it's much more on the technical side and harder to get the end result that you're looking for. So my suggestion might be dialing it in to the curvature you want using, just the control polygons, getting it the shape you want, and then select that magnitude or angle and dimension it as it is. That way it locks it in. I believe you can fix a spline as well. Yeah, there's make fixed. So, with a lot of, since I'm working on more of a concept model, you're not doing as much like dimension after dimension. It's just creating the curvature you want. And then later, yes, you can add in your specific dimensions to make sure it stays exactly how you want it. So, great. Looks like we have 5 more minutes left in our time. So, yeah.
I was just gonna ask, if the pen sketch tool, for like auto shape, like you got a triangle roughly and boom.
Mm-hmm.
If that was allied with the sketching functions, or if they were separate tools.
So you're kind of asking what types of entities are auto-created when you draw on screen?
Yeah, like
Okay.
like we saw last year, you could sketch a slot. It's gonna give you a slot shape.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, the types of sketch entities that you're going to be able to create are splines, lines and arcs, which you saw change back and forth. And then you can do circles, slots, and I believe ellipses. I'll have to double check on that one. I think that's all of them.
Is that toggled by that auto shape button up there that's next to your auto sketch entity?
Yes, I believe so. So that's going to, that created a circle, but the auto shape is what it's doing to convert it to a specific type of shape you're going for. And then the auto sketch entities is when it's actually changing to sketch geometry.
Polygons,
Turn off auto shape.
Hold on one second. What'd you say?
If you were to turn off auto shape right now,
Sure.
just sketch that same rough shape, it's not gonna pull to a circle.
Right, because right now I'm just drawing with the pen essentially. So these are your 2 main commands to determine whether or not you're trying to force it to be a certain geometry, and then auto sketch will change it to actual sketch entities. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
auto sketch a polygon, like an octagon or something.
Can you auto sketch a polygon? I don't believe that that's one of the auto sketch shapes. So, and polygons, that's a little bit more of a specific tool. I don't see them used a lot, so I think that may be why it's not one of the auto shape entities. So the nice thing though is if you're still using pen, you can just use the line tool and make a custom one. That's not hard to do. Obviously, people like creating regular shape polygons, so you can always go in and do that as well. Here's a hexagon. It's still just as simple with the pen tool, so it shouldn't be a hindrance to you while you're modeling. Yes.
Is there an adjustable sensitivity so that if I'm, attempting to sketch a line, and you can probably sketch a far straighter line than I can, that's why I took up CAD 30-some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But, if I swing wider, more wiggly, can I adjust it so that my policy's gonna give me a line that you just nail it on?
Yeah, so I'm just reiterating your questions for the recording. Can you adjust the sensitivity of the pen on screen to make sure it's not getting too wiggly on you, or it's representing exactly what you want it to draw? That's less of a SOLIDWORKS setting as it is more of the touch device that you'd be using. So I just opened up the touch settings here in SOLIDWORKS. You can see you can change between right hand and left hand, as well as one other option. But if you were wanting to adjust sensitivity, that's all going to come down to your device and the hardware communicating with your machine. So I'd adjust it there.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Your workflow for creating the 3D sketch, you started in normal to one of the regular planes,
Mm-hmm.
and you followed the sketch, and then you switched to another view, and then you dragged your sketch into to follow that curve.
Right.
And I've seen another workflow 2D sketch on a plane, and create a different 2D sketch on an orthogonal plane,
Mm-hmm.
and then use projected curves to create that 3D curve in space.
Right. Totally.
I don't know if you thought there was pros and cons of that, why you did it that way. I guess you have less stuff in the feature tree.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, the question is there an advantage to editing splines in multiple planes first rather than creating a single spline and then projecting onto a surface or some other? I would say that getting really familiar and comfortable with sketching in 3D and editing in 3D is really powerful because you're not having to swap in and out of sketching and using other features. I wouldn't say that there's a really hard advantage of one over the other, especially since projecting uses another parametric feature to get the end geometry you're looking for. That can be really advantageous because whenever something's parametric, you're always going to be able to go back and edit, those features. But I've just gotten really comfortable drawing 3D splines, editing them right there in that spline geometry, and then once I know I like it, you're good to go. So yeah, looks like we're all wrapped up. If you'd like to come talk to me up here afterward, please feel free. I have some cards if you'd like to grab one. And thank you for everyone who's stuck through the whole presentation. Thanks, guys.